Greetings to everyone and congratulations to the organizers of this international conference. I am Sanobar Haider, heading the Department of History at Maharaja Bijli Pasi Government Postgraduate College, Lucknow, Uttar Pradesh. And the topic of my presentation is the Indian indentured labor. In my paper, I shall be reflecting upon the history of indentured labor in India and how it came to an end. India became a colony of the mighty British Empire during the dusk of the Grand Mughal Empire, an era which paved the way for the slavery of India. Thus started a period of brutal exploitation, oppression, and abject poverty. The British Indian indenture system was a system of indentured servitude, by which more than 1 million Indians were transported to labor in European colonies as a substitute for slave labor, following the abolition of the trade in the early 19th century. Under the colonial rule, India provided the British Empire with a constant source of cheap and mobile laborers. Many Indians agreed to become indentured laborers to evade the widespread poverty and famine in the 19th century. Some traveled alone and many migrated with their families to settle in the colonies they worked in. After the abolition of slavery in 1834, the demand for Indian indentured laborers increased dramatically. They were sent to plantation colonies producing high-value crops such as sugar in Africa and the Caribbean. Between 1842 and 1870, several thousands of Indians migrated to the British and French colonies. Of these, many went to Mauritius, to Demerara, to Trinidad, to Jamaica, to Natal, to Reunion, and many went to the other French colonies. Thus, by 1870, the indenture system transporting Indian labor to the colonies was an established system of providing labor for European colonial plantations. While coolie labor migration had started in the 1820s, it grew significantly in the 1830s, with the first stream of migrants being shipped to Mauritius, and further with the legalization of indentured migration to the West Indies in 1844. Indentured or coolie migration constituted a contractual agreement which the migrant workers signed at their place of origin. Mostly men were recruited, but often couples and families were also known to have accompanied the men. The journey on the sea was fraught with dangers of different kinds and illnesses, a situation that hardly improved even when they landed on the foreign coast. According to the UNESCO's Memory of the World Register, 11,94,957 Indians were relocated to 19 colonies over nearly 100 years since the 1830s. The difficulties and discriminations faced by the Indian community in places like South Africa, Trinidad, Mauritius, Fiji, and other countries have been documented by historians, sociologists, and writers across the world. The indentured labor system started after slavery was abolished in 1833. And this required the Indians to sign a legal agreement consenting to travel outside India for a minimum of 5 years to work on sugar estates. Only those from the lower caste and weak economic backgrounds were approached for the recruitment. The miserable working conditions on the sugar estates and the conflicts between the communities, especially the whites and the indigenous population, soon led to wide-scale protests against the colonial government. On 18 January 1826, the government of the French Indian Ocean island of Reunion laid down terms for the introduction of Indian laborers to the colony. Each man was required to appear before a magistrate and declare that he was going voluntarily. This agreement is known as Girmit, and it outlined a period of 5 years labor in the colonies with a pay of 8 rupees per month and rations, provided laborers had been transported from Pondicherry and Karaikal. Now, this slide is giving a view of how the indentured Indians in the French Antilles and how was the distribution of the Indian indentured laborers in different parts of the world. The first attempt at importing Indian labor into Mauritius in 1829 ended in failure, but by 1838, 25,000 Indian laborers had been shipped to Mauritius. The Indian indenture system was put in place initially at the behest of the sugar planters in colonial territories, who hoped the system would provide reliable, cheap labor similar to the conditions under slavery. The new system was expected to demonstrate the superiority of free over slave labor in the production of the tropical products for imperial markets. The East India Company's regulation of 1837 laid down specific conditions for the dispatch of Indian labor from Calcutta. The would-be emigrant and his immigration agent were required to appear before an officer designated by the government of British India with a written statement of the terms of the contract. The length of service was to be 5 years, renewable for further 5-year terms. As soon as a new system of emigration of labor became known, a campaign similar to the anti-slavery campaign sprang up in Britain and India. On 1st August 1838, a committee was appointed to inquire into the export of Indian labor. It heard reports of abuses of the new system. On 29th May 1839, overseas manual labor was prohibited, and any person effecting such migration was liable to a 200 rupee fine or 3 months in jail. After prohibition, a few Indian laborers continued to be sent to Mauritius via Pondicherry. Now I shall be talking about the case of Bibi Zahuran, who was one of the female indentured laborers from India. She has given an account of the ordeals of indentures. Her testimony offers an insight into early migration, drawing attention towards a story of deception, ill treatment, and injustice towards the indentured laborers. She has highlighted the kind of harassment women were subjected to, including physical molestation by the plantation owners. Then the existing regulations again failed to stamp out abuses of the system, which continued, including recruitment by false pretenses. And consequently, in 1843, the government of Bengal was forced to restrict emigration from Calcutta, only permitting the departure after the signing of a certificate from the agent and countersigned by the protector. So these are some of the bullet points I have highlighted as far as the Indian indentured labor was concerned. And now this was a period when Gandhiji came into contact with the Indian nationalist leaders such as Gopal Krishna Gokhale, who also raised the issue of political rights of Indians in South Africa on the forum of the Indian National Congress. When they failed in their efforts, they tried to bargain with the British Empire on an indentured labor supply. And it was here for the first time indentured Indians came into the scene as a point of bargain. In 1905, the Indian National Congress passed a resolution asking the Indian government to prohibit the recruitment of indentured laborers for natal. But South African government did not agree over the bargain and passed a bill in 1909 that prohibited rights for British Indians in South African Union. It was a frustrating moment for the elite nationalists. Hence, Gopal Krishna Gokhale moved a resolution on 25th February 1910 in the Legislative Council of India to abolish the indentured migration to South Africa, but the resolution could not be passed. The failure of the Indian nationalist efforts in pushing the government for equal political rights to free Indians in South Africa and Gandhiji's Satyagraha campaign in South Africa itself, which ended in 1913 with a very limited success. The issues of indentured Indians now came to the forefront of the Indian nationalist movement. From the beginning of the second decade of the 20th century, if we talk, then we analyzed that the Arya Samaj and Marwari community of Calcutta also got themselves involved in the anti-indenture movement. The Arya Samaj movement began against the indenture system, was based in UP and Bihar, and the Marwari Sahayak Samiti was working in Calcutta and its adjoining areas. Now, Gandhiji has written about indenture or slavery. There is an article in the Gujarati magazine Samalochak Gandhi where Gandhiji has written and said that indenture is indeed a state of semi-slavery. Like the slave before him, the indentured laborer cannot buy his freedom. A slave was punished for not working, so also is an indentured laborer. If he is negligent, does not attend work for a day, if he answered back, he will suffer imprisonment for any one of these lapses. A slave could be sold and handed over by one owner to another. So too, the indentured laborer can be transferred from one employer to another. The children of a slave inherited the taint of slavery, much in the same way the children of an indentured laborer are subjected to law, especially passed for them. Now, then there were members of the anti-indentured organization in UP who addressed the public in marketplaces and delivered lectures denouncing emigration. Anti-indenture labor campaign also appeared in Bihar. A number of pamphlets were distributed Lectures were organized against indentured immigration, and people were warned against recruiters in the district of Patna, Muzaffarpur, and Darbhanga. And it was on March 20th, 1916, that Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya moved a resolution in the Indian Legislative Council for the abolition of the indenture system. The resolution was accepted by the British government and formally banned the system in 1917. The migration of indentured labor went on till at least the third decade of the 20th century. The last ship carrying indentured laborers arrived in Mauritius in 1924. So this was all about the history of the indentured labor in India. Thank you so much.